Hey gang, welcome back to another video. Now from time to time you may find that you have a project that requires you to make copies of a particular part. And rather than build each one of them by hand, it may just be easier to make a silicone mold. And if so, then this is the video for you, because I need to make a bunch of these in a short amount of time. So let's get to it. First things first, I need to make a box for my mold. And there's a bunch of different ways to handle this, but I went to makercase.com, entered the details for my box, and after a few adjustments was able to download the files before sending them to my Glowforge to cut out. You could make your box with anything from scraps of cardboard to old takeout containers, so a laser clearly isn't required. I'm just a grown man who likes playing with lasers. After the parts were cut out, I did a quick assembly using some CA glue before reinforcing the seams with hot glue. This will not only firm up the box, but it will help to prevent the silicone from leaking out as well. Now that the box is assembled, it's time to place the parts to be molded. These resin-printed greeblies are from my Galaxy's Edge inspired switch covers, which I made in a previous video. I'll leave a link if you want to check that build out too. And once they're all in place, I'll give the whole thing a quick spray of mold release to help make removing the parts easier, and we'll set it aside while I prep my silicone. I chose this tin cure silicone, which is much less sensitive to sulfur, the main cause of cure inhibition in silicones, and is a 1:1 mix ratio by volume, so no math is required. I'm eyeballing the amount needed for this box, but the easiest way I've found to determine the quantity is to pour uncooked rice into your mold box and then empty the rice into another container to determine how much total volume you'll need. Once the two parts are thoroughly mixed, I'm going to throw them into my vacuum chamber to get out all of the air bubbles from the silicone. This will help to ensure a bubble-free mold. Now this isn't necessary, since you can use most silicones without degassing them, but because this part has sharp edges and some thin sections, I don't want to risk having bubble voids in my mold. Once I've gotten most of the air out of the silicone, it's time to pour it into the mold box. I like to start in the deepest part of the mold to allow the silicone to creep in and around the parts. This, along with pouring your silicone in a thin stream, will help to ensure a bubble-free mold. And once I've scraped down the edges for every last bit of silicone, it's time to let it cure. This silicone takes 75 minutes to set up, so I'll make sure that this box is level and then allow it to cure. 75 minutes have passed, and now it's time to see how I've done. I assume that some of the silicone would creep underneath the parts, so I'm gently wiggling the rubber to help free each part before pulling the entire mold away from the box. At first glance it looks good, but I won't know for sure until I've made some castings, so let's get to it. Since these parts are supposed to look like metal, I figured I'd do a bit of cold casting by dusting the inside of the mold with a powdered metal before filling it with resin. This creates a thin outer layer of metal on your casting that can then be buffed to a shine. And with my aluminum powder and a respirator at the ready, it was time to start dusting. It doesn't take much to coat the mold, so start with a little before adding more. And once you've got the mold coated, you can invert it onto a piece of paper to catch any of the excess aluminum powder and set it aside. Then it was time to measure out some casting resin, add a few drops of black tint and the leftover aluminum powder, and mix it all together and pour it into the mold. You'll want to pour into the deepest part of your mold to prevent air bubbles from getting trapped in your casting. Squeezing or shaking the mold can also help to prevent air from getting trapped. This resin takes 10 minutes to cure, so enjoy this quick time lapse. Now that the parts have fully cured, it's time to pop them out of the mold, give them a quick inspection, and get to buffing. And for that, I'm going with ultrafine steel wool. I try to polish in one direction to help give it that brushed aluminum look. And because of the ultrafine steel wool, I'm able to get into most of the recesses of this part to make it look like metal. You could also use a rotary tool with a polishing bit and some polishing compound if you wanted a brighter shine. And here's a quick comparison between the unpolished part on the left and the polished part on the right. Now, while I know that there's some upfront costs associated with making silicone molds, I will tell you this: the time saving on the tail end is worth every penny. Well, that's going to do it for this one. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, go make something.